in right up through to multinational, predominantly in operational roles. So yeah, within brewing, packaging, and trade quality. So what I wanted to speak to you about today is all around quality assurance. And as brewers, that's obviously very close to our hearts. It's what helps to build our brand reputation. It's what gives our consumers confidence in our brands, and it's ultimately what drives brand loyalty. So what I'm hoping to do over the next sort of 10-15 minutes is just give you a few ideas of what good looks like, some good practices. So I'm going to bring up my presentation. Hopefully everybody can see that. Right, so how do we define quality? So quality can mean different things to different people. And I asked a few brewers recently when I was doing my rounds, what quality means to them. And I think there were, a few sort of themes came out, and I'm just going to pick a few. I'm not going to go through each individual one, but some talked about excellence, so seeking excellence in their product and processes. Others talked about high standards and how that can translate to superior products. We've had a big push recently towards the locally crafted. I think that's something that we've seen during COVID, how people are supporting local businesses, and seeing this whole trend of the rise of craft products. But typically, because you're paying a premium, people will expect quality, and that's not necessarily just with beer. That's also with artisan breads, cheeses, cured meats, beer, cider, spirits. There are a number of things there. But one thing which came up frequently is around flavour consistency. And for brewers, they see it that every time a consumer opens a bottle or can of their beer, it's what they expect. It's instantly recognisable, and that's how they know that they're going to enjoy it. So, how do we achieve quality, and what's the approach? And for me, it's so important right up front is to set the standard. And really, that's by taking, a holistic view of what you're wanting to achieve and write it down. And this may seem like a bit of an arduous task. We're all busy people. We've got a lot going on in our lives, but it's actually rather to state, what you stand for and what you're committing to. And so I've got an example here on the right-hand side. I'm not going to read it. It's there for you. You have the presentation afterwards. But really, this is just helping you to define your brand, maybe how it sets you apart from your competitors, how you're going to be managing your suppliers. Typically in the past, I've been lucky, and I hope you have been, but I find that if I look after my suppliers, they look after me, and I think it's obviously a powerful relationship to have. It's your commitment also with your knowledge management. What I mean about that is how you managing your knowledge within your teams, you're educating your teams, and then the continuous improvement from there. How can you find a better best practice or a better good practice within the brewery? And then this all helps to deliver these commitments by following these rigorous procedures and processes. And so therefore, from my experience, setting this standard in stone as a collective approach, this is how we approach our brewing, puts you in a strong position to deliver good quality beer, which is what it's all about. One thing we probably don't really talk about much when within a brewery is actually budgeting for quality. We always talk about our budgets on an annual basis, our fixed costs, our variable costs, but actually taking into consideration quality, which is normally quite difficult to well, not necessarily justify, but if you want to put it and have any quality project, it's always difficult to put a number on. Well, how's that going to benefit you? But the point is, it is so important to make provisions for creating your quality beer, and you need to factor in what those commitments are into your costings. So I always, think that if you're using the best quality ingredients from good reputable suppliers, you're using good brewing science, and sound brewing knowledge, this will put you in a really good position, to achieve your favourable quality. And we're going to have a look at this in a bit more detail now. So in terms of controlling your brewing process, now there are many factors when it comes to, important areas which you must concentrate on and provide focus. But, I'm just chose 3 today. And, if there are any others, afterwards we can talk about these and, some of the breakout sessions. But I'm going to start, and this is in no particular order, around accuracy and calibration. Is your process in control? So, this is absolutely critical. How confident are you that when you're mashing in 6 a.m. in the morning, you're looking at your mash vessel temperature probe and it's reading, let's say 64. Is it 64 or is it 62? Is it 66? How confident are you? Because obviously that's going to affect your conversion rate and your end product. Your FE temperature probe, you're looking at those on a daily basis as you're doing your FE charts. How confident are you with those, as with your gravity measurement, etc., etc. But the point here is, it is so important to adhere to those calibration frequencies. We're all busy with the build up to Christmas at the moment. Hopefully for us brewers, distillers, winemakers, cider makers, our sales will be favourable, even though we have the challenges, obviously, with the on-trade. But even when we're busy, it's just incredibly important to ensure that we are calibrated. And that also goes on for other quality standards around alcohol measurement, pH, micro, colour. But my emphasis, I'm going to say, is on sensory. And this is something that I've seen with some of the craft brewers I've been working with recently, is that where quality control equipment or instrumentation is quite limited, the next best thing is to have a really strong sensory program. And I always say to the brewers I work with, it's an absolute must. Being able to ensure that your beer is true to type at each individual stage, and also having that early detection of any issues that you may have is important. Now, you can, if you haven't got a robust system in place, there's various ways of going about it, and that's obviously working with some of the flavour houses and some of the industry supports there. But you can also create a little bit of fun, bit of team spirit, and that's by using the likes of Beat the Brewmaster, or Pallet Deck. They're online programs, and they're actually quite fun to use. But actually, behind that, there is also some real value in developing the correct terminology when we're talking about beer attributes, and also being able to recognize those flavors. We then come on to maintaining high standards of hygiene, and this cannot be reinforced enough. It's really difficult to get excited about cleaning CIP. We don't get out of bed in the morning and go, great, it's CIP day. It's one of these things which just has to be done. However, it's also what separates out good quality beer to beer which maybe could be questionable. We also talk about the Sinner cycle. So just for clarity there, when we're talking about CIP, we want to find optimum time, temperature, concentration of chemicals, and also the mechanical action. And it's quite a sort of an established approach that if you optimize those 4, then you will have good quality CIP process. However, it goes beyond that, and I think this is something which I've worked on, significantly more, where you say, let's have a look at the CIP and cleaning as a whole. So, for instance, I've mentioned here hygiene checks. Are you cleaning with a hygienic CIP plant and hygienic CIP equipment? And too many times, we don't necessarily spend much time looking at our CIP plant. It's either at the back of the brewery or it's sort of tucked around the corner. But actually, if you're expecting to have a hygienic plant, you've got to start with a clean, hygienic CIP plant in the first place. And the same with the hydraulic checks as well. When was the last time you checked your flow rates of your CIP to your tanks to your mains? are you getting that turbulent flow, an effective cleaning effect? And also the clean device, whether you have static spray balls or multi-axis rotating cleaners, is that right for your application? And the same with your detergent sanitizer cycles. So I think it's worth validating these processes, and something to really important just to keep on top of, so that you can help guarantee your hygiene and so therefore your quality as possible. We then have a look at the packaging process. So we've talked about liquid quality. Many of these aspects apply to packaging too, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but today I've decided to focus on the pack material and the presentation, because ultimately this is the face of your brand. And there again, working with reputable suppliers, but I think ensuring when it comes to your labeling, etc., is ensuring the communication of your pack is correct and it's meaningful. So ensuring that your legislation is correct, which I know you think, well, it would be, why wouldn't it? But actually, you do see issues sometimes, and it can trip people up, and having to rebrand labels and replace labels is obviously a very costly exercise. So ensuring that you've got the description of what it is, the ABV, the volume, where it's produced, etc. But I'm sure this is captured anyway with your brands. But again, providing clear instructions. If your beer is bottle conditioned, we'll say so that people don't get a nasty surprise with the final few mil out of the bottle. And sensible shelf life. I've had this debate with so many people recently around, well, what is a sensible shelf life? And this is obviously very dependent on many factors. One of them being hygiene, cleanliness, as I've just talked about, but also whether you're putting a 10% imperial stout into a bottle versus a 4% pilsner. So therefore, is it 2 years versus 3 months respectively? What is it? And there's a number of factors which play into that. And then just having a look at machinery maintenance as well. So again, I've emphasized the whole accuracy and calibration piece. But I think this also impacts the plant efficiency. And with that impacts potential underfills, potential rejects, maybe poorly constructed cartons. And again, this all has an overall impact on quality. Just carrying on with controlling the packaging process now. And this is really me referring back to quality standards and adhering to quality policy commitments right at the first slide. So, when you're packaging your beer, this is your last point of call beer within the brewery. So therefore, I think we'd all agree that, the quality checks must be on point, absolutely. Especially your micro, where your beer is obviously very susceptible at this stage. It's not going to go through any further processing, seaming, crimping of your cans and bottles, your fill levels, obviously, label and orientation, quality and date coding. Really important in terms of the presentation. But I've included some examples there on the right hand side of some of the coding at the base of the cans, and I think this is really just to highlight, firstly, duplication of information, or as possibly cases one which says 0106 and 105 is obviously unacceptable. But also, what does it mean? There's obviously a time on there, but I think it's so important to have date coding which is meaningful. It actually means something. It's not cryptic. Make it straightforward for yourselves. And then just at the base there, mentioning warehouse and distribution. Again, the importance of controlling, the time, the temperature that your beer is in your warehouse, and the stock rotation, selling the eldest first, but at the same time trying to have as brewery fresh beer as possible. Again, I mention high standards of packaging, of hygiene and housekeeping. I think so sometimes, especially when you're really busy, high volume throughput, you can have a look at some conveyor belts which start to accumulate biofilms, microbacteria, or microbiological activity. Again, just keeping a check on this, as it poses a potential risk in what's a very wet environment. So monitor that. I'm then just going to come on to the importance of oxygen control. And this is something which I've seen as quite a common theme, where brewers don't have the luxury of having gallons or endless volumes of deaerated water. Of how do you control your DO, your dissolved oxygen, within a brewery, and especially with transfers to from tank to tank, and especially from tank to package. And I've just chosen an example from a recent project, even that I thought I would share with you, where the brewer was concerned around flavour instability, flavour inconsistency. We've got a spider diagram here on the left hand side, and what we can see is the green line was the fresh beer, and the red was beer at month 2. And as you can see, that's quite significantly different. And there was a couple of issues that they were finding. Was that firstly, the hop character they found over 2 months was dissipating to the extent it was barely detectable. They were developing the papery, cardboard, typical, meaty oxidation flavors. The drinkability was reducing, and that was mainly down to the whole sort of bitter sweet balance. And it was just off character. This was supposed to be like a session IPA equivalent of session pale ale. And the thing is, without getting into immense detail, the fundamental issue here was really getting back to my first slide, was around setting the standard. There was no standard set in stone. So therefore, the process was therefore not prescribed, and there was not consistency with how beer was being produced amongst a relatively modest sized team. Everybody had a slightly different way of doing these things. So therefore, you'd have some batches of beer which were acceptable, it was good. After 2-3 months, still relatively similar to fresh beer. Others, it just completely unrecognizable. And the issues here just really centered around, the vigilance, the knowledge within the plant, and the procedural gaps, which actually we could close out quite quickly. And I think definitely the brewers could see the benefits there. And so, in summary, it was really, the solutions were how to boost the awareness, how to boost the training, the continuous improvement of challenging what we're doing on a daily basis, and actually, can we do it better? And that really comes quite nicely to my final slide here, because everything I've talked about so far is centered around people. And actually, you've got to be able to reflect quality of what, your quality within your people. And this is right from the beginning, as I've mentioned, setting the standard, providing direction, striving, for high quality beer. And I think I've put seven points down here. This list is actually significantly longer, but just giving some examples. But really just to give a bit of a steer as to how do you achieve that? Because it's all very well putting these processes and procedures into place, but how does this translate into daily activity? And so referring back to my case study then, plant familiarity, being diligent on a day-to-day basis, having a look at the pump leaking, does it appear that a temperature probe may be drifting, whatever else it maybe, just it's the sights, the sounds, is the pump whirring, whatever it may be. Do we require some maintenance here? Recording the findings, to get that consistency, but also help to boost learnings within the team. I've mentioned risk management there, and this is really all about setting the bar high right from the outset, so that as people join the brewery, they know that the importance of quality, but actually, what does that actually mean? Because it can be used very loosely, and so therefore to use this as part of the onboarding process. I've put don't leave until tomorrow. My philosophy has always been job and finish. Very easy to leave stuff until the following day, but actually, it's getting into the discipline of finishing a job once you start it. Shifting blame. Look, mistakes happens to us all. But I think the most powerful thing here is to learn from them and grow stronger collectively, because I think that'll definitely put everybody in a good state. And then ultimately be a brand ambassadors, be proud, be knowledgeable, share the passion. And I think that is so important with an industry which is fantastic. We all love working in. And I'd like to say, thank you for listening, everybody. And obviously very happy to take any questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ed, hi.
Right. Hi there, Simon. Hi.
We just had a question which has disappeared.
Yeah, so I've got one here. Talk about reflecting quality in your people and social systems. How do you implement this effectively in your team? So, yeah, a good question. I think when it comes to the steer with your team, with your people, it's really encouraging the correct behaviours. I think is the best way to put it. As I alluded to there, it's being familiar with the plant, walking the plant frequently to assess, is there a better practice? Taking ownership of any issues, problem solving, building targets, within your process. For instance, reducing your losses within your beer production. Mitigating risks, I think, is a really important one as well. Monitoring, interrogating your systems, and but also being diligent. I think we're always having to make decisions on a daily basis, but we're not doing it at a whim or gut feel. Actually, gather the information, and ultimately involve everybody. This isn't just for the brewing manager or the team leader. This is about everybody, but at the same time ensuring that it's been driven from the top, so that everybody appreciates that it's been taken seriously, and that ultimately the brewery has got to act on any issues.
Yeah, can I just make a comment there, Ed?
Yep.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's communication is the key to excellent performance and quality, and communication on a regular basis, hourly, daily, weekly, so that people talk to each other all the time. They review data, they share the data. I'm quite a fan of visual brewery, where all your KPIs and your quality data are easily seeable by everybody in the brewery, trends and etc. But ultimately, if everyone knows what the objectives are, then they're more likely to work towards them as a team.
Yeah. There's it's a good point. When you've got your shift handovers, great opportunity to discuss, to share information. So I'm just in the interest of time, I'm going to whiz on to the next one. You talk about sensible shelf life period. What can influence your decision here? So yeah, a lot of what I've just discussed then around hygiene standards. I think how confident are you with your micro stability? I've talked about oxygen and the risk of oxygenation. So where are your oxygen levels packaged? If you're around 50 ppb, you're in a good space and below. Whereas, I've worked with some brewers who have been struggling up at 500, 600, and sometimes a little bit higher. So obviously that's going to shorten your shelf life. I think also, if you're pasteurizing, sterile filtering, obviously that's going to extend your shelf life significantly. But a lot of this comes down to taking your samples, forcing samples, actually understand. Back to my point of, rather than just go on gut feel, is work on the data, is act, or react to the data. So as you've forced your samples, at what point do you believe that beer is still brewery fresh, still acceptable to the consumer? Anything to add there, Son?
Yes, well, of course, making sure you've got stored age samples as well of every production run, so you can, in real time, assess yourself within the brewery, how your beer is standing up to aging, and that data is really important to help you develop a robust shelf life for your different products, and each product may have its own different shelf life, and you need to account for that within your protocols.
Okay, I think that is the final question. Yeah, I think that's the final question I can see.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody.